For most of human history, fire was for warmth, cooking, and protection. But about 5,000 years ago, our ancestors discovered something else. Smoke could be used to get high. The story of human smoking doesn't start with the Marlboro Man or 20th century advertisements. It starts in the Andes Mountains of South America and the dusty plains of the ancient Near East. It wasn't a product of industrial innovation, it was a biological accident. To understand why we started smoking, we have to look at the chemistry of plants. Many plants evolved bitter-tasting alkaloids, like nicotine, to prevent bugs from eating them. These chemicals are natural pesticides, but when humans stumbled upon these plants, they realized those chemicals had a strange effect on the brain. The earliest evidence of smoking dates back to around 3000 BCE. Archaeological findings in Argentina show traces of nicotine in ancient pipes. At the time, this wasn't about addiction in the modern sense, it was about ritual. Shamans used smoke as a portal to the spirit world. By inhaling the concentrated vapors of tobacco or other psychoactive plants, they induced trances, visions, and a sense of connection to the divine. Smoke rises toward the heavens. It makes sense that humans thought of it as a bridge between the physical and the metaphysical. In the Americas, tobacco was sacred. It was used to seal peace treaties and treat illnesses. It was a medicine, a sacrament, and a currency. Because it was integrated into social and religious life, it remained regulated by ritual. You didn't just walk down the street lighting up for fun. You smoked for a purpose, and you smoked sparingly. Across the ocean, the story was different. In the ancient Near East, humans were burning herbs like frankincense and cannabis. Excavations at the Tel Arad fortress in Israel revealed cannabis resin burned on limestone altars. These weren't just for smell, they were intended to shift consciousness, helping priests and devotees reach a state of religious ecstasy. But then things shifted. The arrival of the Columbian Exchange in the late 15th century turned a localized, sacred ritual into a global commodity. Tobacco crossed the Atlantic, and Europe turned it into a luxury good. Suddenly, the plant wasn't being used to talk to gods, it was being used to keep sailors awake, suppress hunger in laborers, and signal social status. The sacred had become the secular. This is where the backfire begins. When you burn a leaf and inhale the smoke, you aren't just getting the nicotine or the active compound, you are inhaling thousands of chemical compounds, many of which are carcinogenic. Ancient humans had an excuse. They weren't smoking 20 times a day. They didn't have high-speed rolling machines. And crucially, they weren't living long enough for the long-term health consequences to really matter. Life expectancy in the Bronze Age was often under 40 years. If you smoked for your vision quest at age 25, you died of an infection, a wound, or a famine long before the lung cancer had a chance to claim you. We are biologically wired to enjoy the stimulation provided by these plants. Nicotine binds to nicotinic acetylcholine receptors in the brain, triggering a release of dopamine. It makes us feel alert, calm, and focused. It's a chemical reward that evolution didn't prepare us to resist. But our biology hasn't caught up with our technology. We've taken an ancient, sporadic ritual and turned it into an industrial habit. The backfire is quantified in grim numbers. Today, tobacco use is responsible for the deaths of over 8 million people every year. Unlike the ancient shamans, we have the medical data to see the destruction in real time, yet the habit persists. The tobacco industry of the 20th century turned that biological vulnerability into a massive profit machine. They added ammonia to make nicotine hit the brain faster, and they added filters to make people think they were safer. They took a plant that was meant to be a rare bridge to the spiritual and turned it into a daily physiological prison. The trap is simple. The very mechanism that makes smoking feel good is the same mechanism that forces the brain to demand more. Your brain eventually stops producing its own dopamine in response to normal life because it's waiting for the nicotine hit. When we look back at the ancient pipes and the charred altars, we see a species trying to understand its place in the universe. We see curiosity. We see the human desire to transcend the mundane. But somewhere along the way, we lost the ritual and kept the addiction. We started smoking to look at the stars or speak to the spirits. We ended up in a position where we prioritized the chemical over the experience. We traded a moment of sacred connection for a lifetime of metabolic dependence. History shows us that humans are uniquely prone to hacking their own neurochemistry. We are the only species that looks at a toxic weed and thinks, what happens if I set that on fire? It turns out a lot happens. Perhaps the most thought-provoking part of this journey isn't that we discovered these plants, but that we convinced ourselves we needed them to survive the human experience. As we look at the ruins of those ancient fires, we are reminded that every tool we invent eventually turns back to measure us. We sought the smoke to change our minds, only to realize that the smoke changed us instead. The question is no longer how we can get more out of the plants, but how we can reclaim the peace we were looking for in the first place, without the fire.